Okay, so this lesson is going to be on quotation marks and italics and when we use one versus the other. So quotation marks, we use quotation marks with dialogue. Quotation marks come before and after a speaker's words. We use a comma to separate the speaker's words from the explanatory phrase. Sometimes we call this phrase the attribution because we're attributing the words to somebody, or the tag. Okay, and these are words such as he said. So an example, my favorite dessert is ice cream, Iris said. So Iris said is the tag. Iris said, the word she said, my favorite dessert is ice cream, are inside the quotation marks. The phrase, when the explanatory phrase or the tag is before the dialogue, the comma is outside of the quotation marks attached to the explanatory phrase. Robert replied, comma. There is no space. When you're typing, this is really important. There's no space between the D and the comma, but there is a space between the comma and the quotation marks, and there's no space between the quotation marks and the M. And the reason this is important is because it affects the direction of your quotation marks. Okay, so if you put your quotation marks next to this comma with no space, they're going to turn towards the word replied. We don't want them turning towards the word replied. We want them turning towards the word my. So you need to put the space there, but no space between the quotation marks and the M. Okay, and then we finish it off with the quotation marks at the end. So the comma comes before the quotation marks. It's outside of them. When the phrase is after the dialogue, the comma comes inside the quotation marks. So if you start with your dialogue, I don't eat dessert very much, Frank added. In this case, the comma comes after the word much with no space there. And then the quotation marks. Again, no space between the quotation marks and the comma, no space between the quotation marks and the I. There is space. There is a space. You must hit the space bar once between the quotation marks and the F in Frank. Okay, and this is your tag or your explanatory phrase. You begin the speaker's words with a capital letter unless they continue a sentence already started. Maddie asked, who's home? So the W in who is capitalized. I think Bo said that Dad is. So in this case, this is one sentence. I think that Dad is. We capitalize the I. We do not capitalize the T. Okay, so punctuation besides the comma. The punctuation goes inside the quotation marks when it's part of the speaker's words. So Anne asked, what is your favorite class? So Anne is asking a question. Okay, this is an interrogative sentence. It's her sentence, but it is a question. So because it's a question, we put the question mark inside the quotation marks. A little bit of a tongue twister. However, okay, if the question mark or explanation point is not part of the speaker's words, but if they're part of the sentence, then they go outside the quotation marks. An example, did I just hear Sam say, math is easy? So here, Sam's dialogue is math is easy. That's a statement. It's not a question. The explanatory part of this sentence, did I just hear Sam say, right, is a question. So because the entire sentence, the explanatory part is the question mark goes outside of your quotation marks. This is very odd. It doesn't feel natural. It seems really confusing. So the best way to avoid it is not use a direct quote, okay? So you don't use a direct quote of the speaker. You paraphrase the speaker's words by putting something like that, a conjunction like that in there. Did I just hear Sam say that he thinks math is easy? Okay, so now we're paraphrasing it. We've added the that he thinks into our sentence, so we don't need any quotation marks at all, and therefore we can just put the question mark and it becomes less confusing. Titles. Okay, so when do we use quotation marks and when do we italicize? Okay, so if the title is the part of something bigger, then we put it in quotation marks. So for example, a short story. Okay, so The Fox and the Grapes is a short story in the book Aesop's Fables. So the short story goes in the quotation marks. The book would be italicized. An essay, Civil Disobedience by Thoreau. Usually an essay is published in a newspaper or in a book with a bunch of other essays. And so each individual essay would be in quotation marks. The book or the newspaper title would be italicized. A poem. Okay, so something like Edgar Allan's poem, The Raven. Okay, so the title of the poem is in italics. Again, this would typically be published in something else. So if it was published, it would be published in a newspaper or it would be published in a work of a bunch of poems. And so each individual poem's title goes in italics. This is only when you're talking about them, by the way. This is not at the top of the page. So if you were writing a poem and you're going to title something, you would not put your title in italics. If it was the chapter title, it doesn't go in italics, right? But if you're referring to it in a sentence, it goes in inside quotation marks. The title of a song, okay? Something like Bluebird by Miranda Lambert. That is in an album. The album is the whole, right? That would be italicized, the title. So each individual song on the album would go inside quotation marks. An article from a newspaper, magazine, or website. So again, the title of the newspaper, the title of the magazine, or the title of the website, those would be in italics. But the article or page from that would go inside quotation marks. So Drew Pearson, Tom Flores, selected as finalists for Hall of Fame class of 2021 by Nick Shook. Okay, so the title of the article goes inside of quotation marks. The chapter of a book, the episode of a television series. So again, the television series, the title of the book, those would be italicized. The individual episode or the individual chapter would go inside of quotation marks. So for example, An Explosion for Christmas, which is chapter 2 in the Red Pyramid, goes inside quotation marks, and it's my favorite chapter. So, titles that are italicized are the big whole thing, okay? So, the titles of books, such as The Red Pyramid, the title of a play, such as Dorothy in Wonderland, the title of a film, such as The Lion King, the title of a song album, such as Folklore by Taylor Swift, the title of a television series, such as American Ninja Warrior. Those are all italicized, as are the titles of magazines or newspapers, such as the Boston Globe. Okay. So, for your assignment, write one sentence that includes dialogue using correct punctuation and capitalization. You can choose to put your explanatory phrase or tag anywhere you wish. So you could put at the beginning, in which case the comma would come before the quotation mark for the dialogue. Remember, the period goes inside of it. It could come at the end, in which case the comma comes at the end of the dialogue before that last quotation mark, and then you put your period at the end of the explanatory phrase. Or you can choose to put it in the middle, okay? And so you'd get a comma, and you'd get a comma, assuming it wasn't two sentences. If it was two complete sentences of dialogue, then you've done more than I've asked, because I just asked for one sentence. So assuming it's one sentence and you're just putting your tag in the center, you have a comma, quotation mark, you have your tag, comma, and then quotation mark. Okay, and then put your punctuation inside that last quotation mark. Okay, so these are here for examples for you, right, as are your notes. Okay, so you can also look at the notes in your binder. That would be Blue Notes number 41. Okay.